Hello, everybody. Welcome to UK CORRAL. This is a podcast that reviews every single comic ever written by a British writer. I'm your co-host, Mike L, and as always, I'm joined by Adamantium.
Chip.
All right. And, of course, Nice Man.
I got nothing.
All right. So appropriate. All right. Well, I guess this hasn't got your back up at the wall, so that's a good thing. But I personally did not know anything about this comic, or I'd never heard of it before we announced it. But this is your choice, Adamantium.
Yeah, and I won't go too much into detail about the background of it, but this is based off of, as far as he can tell, the historical life of his parents. So This is by Raymond Brigg, a very renowned illustrator of graphic novel works, but primarily for children's picture books. He's probably best known for his works The Snowman, Father Christmas, Fungus, the Bogeyman. But he's also known for some of his graphic novel work, including When the Wind Blows, and this one, Ethel and Ernest, A True Story.
When did he write and draw this?
This was released in 1998, and I guess he had been working on it for a number of years leading up to it. So at the time of its release, it was considered a critically acclaimed book, and it was well revered, but was a challenging one to find a market for because he had been known as a picture book illustrator. This is not a book for children. It's not a type of story that fits neatly into kind of the accepted genres of graphic novels and comic books. However, it's, I feel, a really great exploration of a time capsule of two lives that would often be the type of lives not explored in the comic medium. So I'm very excited to get into this and see what everyone has to say.
Yeah, and then that, you said like 1998 or so?
That's the publication date, but from what I understand, he had been working on this for a number of years, both with the art and also performing research about the lives of his parents leading up to the events of this book.
And I think that's a good 16 years after When the Wind Blows.
Uh-huh.
So was this originally published in this format? Do you know?
Yes. So not in individual comics. It was as a graphic novel. And, as an aside, I don't really care for those terms, whether it's a comic book or graphic novel. Different people have different ideas of what that means. To me, sequential art. I don't care what you want to label it as. However, this is unique where I think this is the first time we're reading something, at least to my recollection, where it was released in one large book, not in individual issues.
Yeah, and if you could be right. And I think the other thing to note is that it reads like a collection of almost like, not daily strips, but each scene is a page or two usually, right?
Yeah, it's almost like a series of vignettes.
Right.
Now, we'll see as we get into the structure of the book, it is broken up into various years. And as you can tell, recounting the years of his parents' life from 1928 through 1971, in the Western world, quite a bit happened in that time. So this is not only going to be an exploration of the lives of his parents, but also a kind of capstone of what world events were happening at the time and how the average working class British citizen perhaps engaged with this, whether it was the war or changing social mores or even economic affliction that's happened in recessions throughout the 20th century. A lot that's going to show the reality of how this impacted average working class people.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let's get started then. So you can see my screen, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So again, we obviously can't go panel by panel or page by page, but feel free to summarize this however you like. It's up to you.
Yeah, maybe I'll do the first section because these are broken up into basically snaps of years. So the initial one is 1928 through, I believe, sometime in the 1930s. But we just see, as you said, almost like comic strips where incidentally Ethel and Ernest meet each other. Ernest is just riding his bicycle down the street, and as Ethel is wringing out her dust rag to just clean it through the window, he mistakes her waving at him, and they just kind of have I believe the kids call it a meet cute. And this just progresses until it went from an accidental greeting to Ethel actually appearing to have some feelings, being interested and waiting by the window for this young man to come by on his bicycle, and culminates in them going on a date. And we get a better exploration of the characters. We see Ernest is a very working class man. He's a little bit gruffer in his speech, and he's a man who likes basic things. He likes the movies. He likes a good beer. Whereas Ethel, she is trying to move up the social ladder. She's working for the gentry as a maid, but she's hoping to establish herself within the burgeoning middle class. And the sequence that Mike is on right now, I love the panel layout of that, where you have this wonderful, almost oppressive empty space in this living room as Ethel is resigning from her post as a caregiver for this home. You really get this sense of austerity, the oppressive austerity in this room that she's in, especially with the sort of bloody red color palette of it. It's just something kind of sickly feeling and oppressive feeling about that sequence.
And also, since we're on the page, look at the almost mirror image of this bubble and this giant empty space here.
Mm-hmm.
Quite effective. Anyway.
No, very effective. And then other great placement too. And I think this is the advantage that maybe Briggs has as a children's book illustrator as opposed to working with conventional superhero or comedy comic books, because we get to see a little bit more experimentation that you would see perhaps in a picture book, such as this wide breadth of white space surrounding Ethel and Ernest as they're walking away with her belongings from her former employer, and they're planning to be married. So the rest of this sequence essentially, then we get to the next section. So yeah. I'll take a little break there, but that's the first section where we just see the, again, that I hate the term, but I'll say it, meet cute. And then their, I guess you could say, introduction to their characters, the differences that they'll have, and some amazing artwork as well. This next section Mike pulled up. This is what I love so much about Briggs' work. There's a lot of comic artists that can have a myriad of details in their work, but there's something so unique about his experience as a children's book illustrator. When you just see the brickwork and the intricacy of the panels on top of the roof and even the reflections of the windows, this is a breathtaking image, and I love it. Just going forward a little bit in the narrative, they're buying their first house. And it's a little bit of a charming culture clash you can see where she is feeling, oh, maybe this isn't quite up to snuff. This isn't exactly what I was hoping for. But they're also both awed by such things that I think in a charming way we find pretty antiquated or would see as being ubiquitous, such as electric lighting and a bathroom. Those are things that they're marveling at, which goes to show the sort of change of what's happening technologically at the time. And then the rest of the section, they're exploring their home. They're engaging in basically building their relationship and who they're going to be. There's a great sequence if you go forward. I believe it's a page or two, Mike, where we see despite all this change of what's happening after their marriage and after getting these new material features. I believe it's the next page. Oh, yeah, this one actually.
This one? Sorry.
The one where they're in the empty room where despite this and despite the kind of middle class that they're trying to enter into, look at the vacancy of this room. It looks so cold and isolated. And you see them huddling together on this thin mattress. This for them is social movement, climbing up a social ladder, and yet it's not squalor exactly, but it's so minimalist and so frugal. It's kind of amazing to think that this is on the cusp of the 20th century where creature comforts are really going to come into play for the middle class. And this is such a new phenomenon. They don't even have furniture or the goods to fill the house yet. So again, as a historical record, very fascinating. Now, I will say one thing about this work right now is that as it's progressing, it can seem almost, I guess you could say, inconsequential. Yes, it's cute to see this antiquated way of living at this time, but is it saying anything more than that? It doesn't really seem like there's much else going on. As the pages progress and we go on and they manage to accumulate more possessions, something interesting begins to happen. We do get the sense where there are world events happening outside of the house. Now, I believe it's going to be either the next page or the page afterwards that comes up. But as they're going through these material possessions and they're talking about things such as, what if we're going to have a kid? What's going to happen to our family? Then suddenly we have Ernest reading a newspaper going, did you read about this Adolf Hitler? Probably nothing bad is going to happen. It's so fascinating. It says they're publishing his book over here, Mein Kampf, it's called, and the profits are going to the Red Cross, where Ethel goes, oh, that's nice of him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is where the book starts getting good, because it could be kind of cutesy and almost a throwback to pre-modern times or pre-contemporary times of the simplicity of this burgeoning middle class, but we see an undercurrent happening, what's outside the home, through the building tensions of world wars igniting between these political strives that are going to be occurring outside, which eventually do engender into World War II. So this is, again, contrasted by the civility and the kind of, I guess you could say gentility of their home life. Then we get to the birthing scene, because now Ethel is giving birth to their son, Raymond. And again, this is where the sort of idyllic, I guess you could say, nostalgia of this comic and this narrative shows a darker turn. Because while you have the almost cliched element of Ernest coming in, being relieved, happy that his wife gave birth to a child, the doctor comes in and says, no more. You're going to lose your wife if she has any more children. Your wife is 38. There better not be any more. And there's this tension you see, because then Ernest goes to himself, maybe out loud to the doctor, but we wanted a proper family. So we have this tension between what they actually want and what's best for his wife. And there's this understanding of her mortality in that exchange. And again, I think what's happening now is we're seeing these undercurrents of darkness happening in the comic beyond the kind of, I guess you could say, innocuous, almost treacly, what could be a domestic scene of bliss and cuteness. She almost died in childbirth. There's economic strife and a potential world war that are rummaging in the background, or ruminating in the background, pardon me. And these tensions erupt throughout the comic. In fact, in this next scene, after they have Raymond and they're bringing him into the yard, they begin having debates about politics. He mentioned something about being working class, and Ethel very hotly responds, we're not working class. And maybe, Mike, I know you're a bit more tuned to this, and I certainly am, but the whole notion of class awareness or even class identity, maybe the average Canadian or American reader wouldn't make much of this and even wonder what the big deal is, but class identity is a huge thing in the UK, and particularly at this point in history was massive.
Well, yeah, and that's probably something Paul can illuminate a little bit, right, Paul? Because it's not quite the same over here.
I have to say that even though I'm not that old, there's a lot of this stuff, but for sure in Britain, especially before the Second World War, the class system was absolute. Absolute. If you were born into the working class, you're working class, and that you need your place. Right. And anybody that happens to come from an upper class, you kind of like, don your cap to them, as they go by. They're your superior. And I think there was still a lot of that even after the Second World War, but not as much until, honestly, the advent of the Beatles. And after the Beatles and everything that came with the Beatles, then that was just about done with. But at that time, yes, I mean, Ray Brigg's father is a milkman, and that's what he is. And the mother is, I think she gets a job eventually, but she knows that that's their kind of place. And yeah, the thing about this is that, if somebody says, I'm going to do a graphic novel, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, the expectation is there's going to be something fictional, like whether it's like, Snowman or whatever, something fictional. But this isn't. This is absolutely real.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's great. That's great. What do you mean? Well, where's the fiction? Is there something magical going to happen? No. Just the story of my parents' life from 1928. Well, who's interested in that? Everybody, because they're human beings and you can relate to it,
Mm-hmm.
You can relate to this much more than some flight of fancy. And so it's just wonderful that, I think.
Well, yeah, and of course, in the States there's Harvey Pekar. I'm sure you've read American Splendor, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love American Splendor, and different but similar vibe, similar idea. But anyway, we can get back to this because there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I just want to bring up too, to the point about class systems, that this was at a very unique point in history from at least what I was able to read, where there was this notion that you could achieve a middle class because the burgeoning middle class of the UK in the early 20th century was really brought on by the advent of all these like creature features of home and new technology that was made affordable for kind of working class people. But the hook of everything was the fact that even though the idea was you would have this newfound middle class you could enter into, you're still working class. You're still toiling. It's just you're getting these sort of, I guess you could say, tokens of greater class representation, or these sort of, I guess you could say, features that you would normally associate with higher class systems, such as having luxuries in the kitchen, having certain equipment, certain features such as paintings and art on the wall. And to me, I think this is what this is underscoring. More than just being a story about Ray Brigg's parents, this is a story about the 20th century and about the changes happening in the Western world. And for that, that's pretty massive to me.
Mm-hmm.
I am going to recount just a little bit more, and I think I'll hand off the recounting to somebody else once I reach the next time frame break. But we go on seeing this class divide a little bit further as we have one of Ernest's relatives come in. And she is kind of your idea of being a very down and out, less savory individual from a lower class, even though she's perfectly lovely and friendly, very generous, bringing over bottles of stout and a packet of coal. Ethel is having none of it. The coal is leaving dust everywhere. Why would they want to drink stout? They're covering their faces because she smells a bit odorous. It's an idea, again, of now that they're in this bourgeois newfound middle class, they're trying to get away from this, and you're seeing these fractures from where Ernest came from to where he is now. Now, going on, you still see interspliced with these domestic scenes things such as talking about the events happening throughout Europe, such as I think it's Ernest. Yes, Ernest mentioning in bed, he heard on the CBC, did you know if you are a Jew in Germany, you're forbidden to marry a German? And again, just little hints that something is going on in the world that's very unsettling and very wrong. But I think it's played very insidiously. In fact, it becomes even darker, played off by these kind of frivolous domestic scenes that we're engaging with, including, as I mentioned, here's Ethel with all these creature comforts. She has a device that allows her to do her laundry in a large vat, and she can clean it all at home by herself. Isn't that incredible? What a change. What a technological breakthrough that is. And the course of the story continues that way. We're seeing good engagement between these characters, a greater sense of who they are. Ethel wants to adhere to these class conventions. She wants to basically climb up the ladder and become something close adjacent to what she served at one point, the gentry. And here is Ernest. He doesn't care about that. He actually has socialist leanings, as he's indicating here. He mentions his brother Fred, and he's making criticisms about the market and about the labor economy. And he says, well, no wonder brother Fred is a communist. And it's just little touches like that that indicate the differences between these characters and really emphasize who they are. The story goes on, and we see Ray Briggs getting dressed up, going to school, and during, again, these domestic events, the BBC or the newspaper is showing stories about what's happening throughout Europe with the rise of the Nazis in Germany, to the point where they're actually hearing over the radio that infamous proclamation that Hitler made, where the masses within the square of, I believe it was Munich, are saying Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil. And Ernest is going, just hark at them. They're all barmy. I love that. Mm-hmm. So time passes on. We get more and more information about the conflicts happening overseas and how it's pertaining to impact the UK and their home. Because now Ernest has returned from his run as a milkman. And I think I failed to mention that. He's a very working class individual. He's a milkman, which is why he's making his deliveries on his bicycle. But he comes back with news that Hitler's marched into Prague now. He'll be coming down our road soon. And now we see the, I guess you could say, the attempts to fortify the home, putting blackout screens over the windows, making sure there's shelter, and adhering to gas masks to test them out in case there's an attack of poison gas. And again, this tranquil domesticity completely thrown on its head by the looming battle that's about to take place. And again, more great lines happening here as we see these subtle class divisions between Ethel and Ernest. They're discussing issues in Ireland, discussing issues throughout Europe. And as they continue having these debates, what's so fascinating now is another very heartbreaking piece of history, which is going to erupt on the next page, Mike. The announcement that with Germany and the Axis entering into the territory of the UK, children in these urban areas are being forced to evacuate. And so they have to send Raymond off for his own good. So there's a very famous children's story that references this. Do you know what that is, Mike?
No, I don't.
Okay, so this is actually part of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Really?
That's why the children are sent away to the professor's house.
I had no idea. I'm a fan of those movies, and I'm sure I read the books as a kid, but I did not know that.
Yeah. A very minor detail in the background. It's easy to miss.
And I wanted to also point out that although I did know about the Blitzkrieg and everything, or the Blitz, I did not know that they had to fortify houses from gas attacks. I had no idea. So
well, they encouraged their populace to. Not everyone took them up on that measure, even though most people were so frightened they felt they had no choice to. And in the next couple pages, we're going to get, for the sake of a montage or recap, Raymond is out in the country. He's sending letters back to his family. We have Ernest building a bomb shelter in their backyard. There's a very humorous scene where both him and Ethel are kind of just within it together. He's saying, "Oh, isn't this comfortable, love?" And Ethel goes, "Oh, it's going to be great if, the water isn't up to my legs." Mm-hmm. And there's a great sequence right after that, after this great stretch of white space where all the text was on the previous page. Now that white space is almost just like the rising sun, reflecting off the grass as Ethel and Ernest look up. And we have Ernest say, "I expect it will be okay. They say Hitler's assured Holland and Belgium of his friendship." To which Ethel goes, oh, that's nice. And that's when we get the next timestamp where we enter into 1940. I'll hold off on the recap for now.
Okay, let me try my best here, folks. I'm not going to do as good a job as Adam, unfortunately. I already don't remember what's happening here. But yeah, okay, so we're in 19... So what year are we in now?
This
1940s to 50s.
40s to 50s.
Yeah, so the war is still going on, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It hasn't started. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Just started.
Yeah, it just started, yeah. It's actually kind of, I don't want to say depressing, but it's scary to be reading these updates from the radio, like the Battle of France is over, the Battle of Britain is about to begin, and they're just going on with their regular lives, and then of course now we see this contrast with the earlier scene in the movie. The house is completely destroyed. It's pretty sad. But life goes on, and yeah, I don't know. They're just trying to keep going, keep rebuilding. And they decide to move, correct?
I don't believe so, Mike. They've actually stayed in the same house throughout their life. So I think what you're seeing now is a visit they're giving over to Raymond in the country where he's stationed at. Yes.
Okay, right. Yeah. Oh, I don't know. This is just freaky to me, just because of stuff that I hear that's going on overseas right now. It kind of just reminds me of that,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. So this also I didn't know anything about. So this is like a shelter that they're building, and I don't really know. Is this something? I guess it's something they sleep in. This is crazy. But as you can see here at the bottom, yeah, like he's laying in bed in the shelter, like reading the paper. The war is continuing. Germany's invaded Russia, so obviously it's coming to a close. And yeah, I don't. It looks like the war is almost over here. And oh, is this is the son now? Or no, this is the father still.
Yeah, this is after he had to go to the docks because he's a volunteer firefighter at this point.
Oh, right, okay.
And he's had to, after the Blitz, move bodies that have been immolated. So that's something I just want to mention, which I really appreciate that Briggs does here. He comes across with the gravity and the severity of war and the impact it's having on them without showing anything graphic or provocative just for the sake of shocking, bloody imagery. It's all there in the wavering text of Ernest's dialogue and his slumped posture. You just see, yeah, he even says, all in bits, I had to, and he can't even finish his sentence. That's very harrowing stuff.
Yeah. And like you said, there's no exploitation here. There's no shock value. It's just the way that they're reacting to it. But it's also, you want to talk about the art here. Like, look at him, all the way he's dressed, contrasted with these nice, bright colors here of the home there. It's great. And then what's this now? Oh, now it's Christmas time, so they're decorating for Christmas. And yeah, we're getting little references to politics that are going on, throughout Europe. Like we see here, we've signed a pact with Joe Stalin, 20-year pact through war and peace, and we're kind of getting back and forth conversations, and we can see, the difference in their two characters, and also a little bit of, with hindsight, our hindsight is 2020. We can see, some of the irony and some of the things they're saying, right? 20-year pact, very, very nice as long as it lasts. It's 20 years. Well, how many years was his pact with Hitler? So we can read all this with hindsight. And then it looks like, so now she's going to be working in an office, so she's moving up in her career. And then, what's this now? Oh, this is a jet, a plane that's crashing to their house, right?
Yeah, this is part of a blitz because the blitz initially was focused upon urban areas of the UK, but it would expand out to some of the provinces. And this is showing the aftermath of that And the bunker that you referenced earlier comes into play because we see the futility of these efforts to try to preserve themselves. Look at the carnage inside of this house and the teddy bear that Ernest is holding up with shards of glass sticking out of it.
Right. Yeah, this reminds me of the old, atomic bomb drills where you kids would put their heads, under their desk or whatever, just outrageous, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's sad. And then here we get another image, like a repeated image of the house, and now everything's being decorated. So now the war is over. It's VE Day, and they're celebrating. And then I guess this is one of their neighbors. So they didn't lose their son, right?
No, so
This is
the
a neighbor.
neighbor did though, and yeah, again, just one of those small contrasts that happens in this book where we have what would be, a cause of celebration, VE Day. Of course, why wouldn't everyone be happy the war is over? But throughout of all Ernest's jocularity, he says this to somebody whose son died in the war, and yeah, just that kind of quietness right after. Again, I think that this is something that I think Briggs does really well in this book. The dialogue is, it can be funny at times and charming, but it's the silences he uses, which I really appreciate throughout this book.
Yeah, and he kind of just lets the moment hang there, right? Like there's no resolution to it. It just moves on to the next thing. Oh, and see, and this is touching on things I don't really know much about, but it looks like so there's been an election and the Labour Party wins, right? I don't know what year this is supposed to be.
That's
Well, it's still 45.
45.
Okay. And so
Is it 45 or 46?
it's probably 46, I assume.
No, it's 45 because they're
okay.
going to mention the bombing of Hiroshima coming up right after this.
Okay. And then, yeah, so they're just talking about how, right here, this is where they mentioned the atomic bomb, Hiroshima, 100,000 dead. And, just, again, the casual conversation. It's just the typical stuff that still goes on today, right? And they talk about how, well, at least there won't be any more wars. Well, why not? Well, you can't fight a war with bombs like that. Why not? Everyone will be dead their first day, Thankfully, that threat's over. Anyway, so then they're talking about, so now this is their son, correct?
Yes, so now he's back home with his family. They're all in the house, and he's entering into school.
Right.
But not just any school, grammar school.
Which I don't know what that means exactly. What does that mean?
It means that's where the smart kids go, the upper class kids go.
What if you're
But he's
lower
not-
class, but you're smart?
Then we're like this because Raymond Briggs came from a working class family,
Okay.
but he did well enough on his exams to get a scholarship to go to grammar school.
Gotcha.
So that means, hey, that's a bit of a ticket to rise up in his future. So that's why the father says, I hope he doesn't become posh. Like he becomes too good for them.
Sure. Yep. And so he's off. And then, okay, so what's this scene here? I don't remember this.
Oh, this is interesting because we're seeing some of the changing social mores happening where basically one of his neighbors is just having a casual conversation as he's giving him his, daily delivery of milk. And he goes, my wife, I can't cope. What do you mean? Oh, she just needs it all the time. If only someone could do that. Like I say, if you came over, you'd be doing me a favor. Basically insinuating he would want him to sleep with his wife. Which is, it's just crazy to see this change. And you can just sense just how, I guess you could say, he's not exactly conservative, but he definitely is taken aback by this. And after stumbling out a response, he goes, I have to go now, Alf. I'll see you later. This isn't brought up again, but I think it's just a little sign showing, again, piecemeal how things are changing in the UK and how, the old class systems and ways of comportment are shifting. And we're going to see this again in the next scene where, what is this? Poor young Ray Briggs is brought in by the police.
So their son was apprehended breaking and entering the golf club and stealing valuable billiard cues.
Hmm.
And so they're obviously not happy about that. Um,
Yeah, his mother is horrified
right,
because this doesn't match with her pretensions, right?
right.
With her son. No, 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 no. This,
Hmm.
this can't be, because like the police said, next time it will be Borstal. Borstal means like, like a prison for kids.
Mm. Like juvenile hall.
Yeah. Oh,
Somewhat,
yes.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, you'd become, when I was a kid, yeah, you'd be called like a Borstal boy. Like,
Mm.
oh, dear,
Right.
dear, dear.
It's funny. I just want to quickly point out one thing. My uncle and aunt owned a house in Tecumseh that had a little, I believe it was like a latch on their front porch. And if you opened it up, there would be coal inside. Like you could crawl in and you could also access it through the inside. And me and my cousins would go sit on the coal. I think it was coal. It must have been. It was like a little room, and we'd sit, and there was maybe like 2 feet of open air, and we'd just sit there and hang out there. It's just cool because we had the same thing. Anyway, just a thought.
Oh, yes.
What's that?
Yeah, we used to have coal delivered when I was
Yeah.
a young kid. Oh,
So
yeah.
cool. Anyway,
Cool. Cool. Did you say cool?
yeah, cool.
Don't you see what Ethel's been saying about coal? You get all the coal dust and this and that.
And not to say that I want to breathe,
Filthy.
not to say that I want to breathe it in, but I'm just saying that it's cool that they had that. You know what I mean?
Well, it definitely wasn't something I think we saw too often in with the times we were growing up, in the area we were growing up.
Yeah. To be honest, it might not even have been coal we were sitting on. It might have been filled in with like rocks or something. It's just that was the area that it was kept in, But when I was a kid in the 80s, I don't think they were actually using it for anything, from what I remember. Anyway, I'll have to go check it out. The house is still there. So, okay. So I don't remember what happens in this scene. You're gonna have to help me, Adam.
Yeah, basically, there's just more exchanges happening between them. They're talking about shifting technological changes and new creature comforts entering into the home. And we're getting this divide where we can see Ernest is very pro-labor. He's very pro-proletariat. He has that socialist leaning. And then Ethel is all about the class conventions and the pretensions of austerity. So she wants them to talk a certain way, to present themselves a certain way, which is why she's so thrilled when her son entered into grammar school. And the next few pages are just showing that divide. And we're getting sequences of them fixing up the house. There's a brand new crazy contraption that Ernest brings in, which is a fridge to keep things cold in the house. And
yeah, go ahead. No, I was just gonna say I saw a retro fridge like that, and I want to buy it. But anyway, that's it. Like in Windsor, anyway.
Oh, well, it could be the one from this family. You never know.
Yeah, you never know. Yeah.
He shipped it over here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the next thing of importance that happens, Mike, is the news that to the detriment of Ethel, now their son Ray has said he no longer wants to go to grammar school. He wants to go to art school, to which even, leftist, socialist leaning Ernest goes, art school? Oh, blimey. It's such a shame. He may have gone to Oxford and Cambridge and got a nice job in an office. Oh, it's just hilarious. Yeah.
And see, I think we talked about this on this podcast, is we don't really have art school in North America. This is the British thing, right?
I hadn't really thought there isn't such a thing as art school. I thought there was art school in New York and other such places.
I mean, in a way, but like the way I understand it is like all of the Beatles, all of the Rolling Stones, probably anyone who was in a rock band, they all went to like, and help me out, Adam, but like we really just have regular high school, and you might have like Walkerville, which is like an artistic school, but it's really just a high school with artistic leanings, but it's not a different type of school, right? Whereas in the UK, an art school is more, I believe, focused on teaching you everything about all the arts, correct?
Sorry, go ahead. I mean, I believe so. And Paul McCartney and John Lennon kind of went to art school, and but not the Rolling Stones. Mick Jagger went to the London School of Economics.
Oh, really? Okay. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Keith Richards did then. But it's just not something we have here. We just don't really. You would never say you go to art school unless it's like I said. Like there might be maybe in New York or maybe in like specific, but it's not as many as far as I know. Not as common.
Mm.
But anyway, and then of course there's the typical reaction. There's no money in it. He'll never earn a living at it. There's all that lot's all long-haired drink and nude women. And then, of course, we're getting more politics. Russia has exploded an atomic bomb, and which brings us up to the Oppenheimer chronology, basically, right? And then that ends the decade of 19. We're up to 1950 now. So,
right. So we've been going since 28. We're up to like 1950.
Mm-hmm.
Made it again, all real stuff, but real stuff through the eyes of a very working class couple. And that's great because this is a great history. If people really want to know about history, it's not just the big events in history books. This is history from real people, real life.
Right. Well, like the fact that I've watched 100 movies set during World War II, and I'm learning things about World War II in the UK that I didn't know about, which just shows that most of the movies are focused on the battles or the politicians or the army or whatever it may be, right? So,
of course. Can you imagine if they said, we're going to make a movie about World War II. We're going to make it just about, the ordinary lives of people. But they would say, what? However, in the 80s, John Borman made Land of Hope and Glory, which was about when he was a child.
Which I've never seen.
Oh, a great film.
See, and even this right here, like I'm imagining this as like a weekly drama where, I mean, using this as a spine, you're just getting people's regular lives, but all of this is going on around them. I think it'd be interesting. Anyway.
Yeah, you could do it. So by 1950, the Labour government, the first ever Labour government, has been in power for like 5 years, which should make Ernest very happy. But Ethel, of course, has she has that typical working class, well, not typical, but some working class regard, like, no, there are people who are better than me, and she just accepts it, and they set the standards. They're gentlemen, they're this, they're that, and she accepts that her place, is where it is, and she's not really to expect much more than that. She's quite okay with it, and she has regard. So here we are from 50 to 60, of course. So, shall we dive in?
Sure. I'm sorry for butchering the previous decade, but hopefully, Paul, you can do a better job than me.
I'll try. So anyway, so now we're in the 50s, and Raymond Briggs is, by this point, he's about what? How old is he now? Like 13, 14?
About that, yeah.
So, he realizes, and you start seeing the divisions between the younger generation already and the older generation, because his father just, he can't bring himself to dirty up the bathroom. So he cleans himself up in the kitchen. And his son says, but Mom's trying to cook. This is a kitchen. No, I can't do this in the bathroom, But, the father's an interesting character because he's always quite excited about modern developments in technology, whereas, his wife is not really impressed by things. However, she did say that she likes the laundromat because then she can just take the clothes there and doesn't, have to struggle with them at home. And so, Ernest is quite impressed by everything electric this, electric that. We're getting into the electric 50s, whereas Ethel was like, well, me and all my brothers and sisters and parents, we grew up without anything electric and we were fine. Everybody always says that about their life, if they want to justify their life.
Right.
Well, we didn't have that. We were fine. I love the way everybody always values everything through their own experience, and rationalizes it and justifies it. But we've got this nice little tension because Ernest is quite a Labour supporter for obvious reasons, whereas Ethel has got these kind of like, as I said, this really unwarranted regard for the higher classes. So she prefers Mr. Churchill and everything, and she's not fond of Labour because Ernest is complaining about the rationing. It's been like 5 years now since the war is over, and they're rationing this down and that rationing. She's like, yeah, well, that's your Labour government for you, and that really does sum up how many people in working class families feel. I think, in my experience, they're either very, very strong Labour supporters, or they have derision for Labour, because they what can I say? They kind of admire the higher classes. They admire the higher stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So anyway, there we are. We're moving on. But these two, no matter even if they argue, they always seem to make up. Meanwhile, the son now has a girlfriend and going to art school, and is growing his hairs. So the 50s must be going on, because now there's something about the Korean War, which is, I think, started in 53. And so Ethel's worried in case her son gets called up to go and serve in the Korean War. But anyway, he's busy at art school. But then he does do national service, because in the 50s you had to do national service a couple of years. And here he is in military uniform at home, and the mother's pleased to see his hair is finally being cut, because in the 50s, hair was getting a bit longer with the beatniks. But her son's hair is now being cut because he's in the military. However, she's not too happy to see him wearing boots, because they're so common. She really has disdain for where she comes from. Boots are common. Yes, but you're a common family. You're a working class family. But she doesn't like it. It reminds me of my mother, to be honest with you. I can tell you some things about that. And here's reference to Ernest being shocked to discover that in the general election, I think this is of like 55, there's a 26-year-old woman who's standing as a candidate for the general election. She's a woman. She's only 26, and she's a Tory. She's a conservative. But Ethel always has these wonderful kind of put downs, a bit like with Archie Bunkers. In All in the Family. She has these wonderful put downs when he's like, what in the world, what's the world coming to? And she's like, but I thought your Labour believed in equal rights for everybody. If they do, then what's the problem? She's a woman, she's 26. So what? I thought Labour believed in equal rights. So there's easy hypocrisy. And I love the way Ethel, burst the bubble. And you know which woman he's talking about, don't you?
No.
Margaret Thatcher.
Come on. I didn't realize she ran that. She didn't come into power until the 80s, right?
Right. But when she was a mother, she had children, and she used to go to meetings or whatnot. She would be castigated by her own conservative, fellow voters and colleagues.
Right.
What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be at home with the children?
Wow. Well, good for her, but I only know the bad things that have been said about her by, all the people that hate her. So I don't know much about her.
Well, I mean, she had to overcome a lot.
Yeah.
She did all the prejudice within her own party.
Right.
She had to overcome that and bit by bit, rise up. So definitely admirable in that sense, to stand up for yourself, to fight and persevere. But anyway, so meanwhile, Raymond is now getting certificates from the art school, but Ernest is still worried he's not going to actually get a job that will pay some money, because that's Ernest's experience, isn't it? You get a job, you earn some money. What is this art certificates? Show me a job, show me money. And now he can get his own back on Ethel about rationing, because now it's a conservative government, and with Churchill as prime minister, and rationing is still going on. So look at the effects of the war. Here we are in the 50s. Rationing is still going on. Okay. So moving on. Look at the things that are happening now. They have a telephone. Ethel is always very kind of wary about these newfangled inventions. She's even afraid to answer the telephone if Ernest isn't there. And they have a TV. They have a, little black and white TV. I'm always amazed at how Ernest has managed all he's managed on the pay of a milkman. Like, how did he get that house? How did he I mean, this man is quite a marvel, but he's very handy. He's able to make stuff, a lot of stuff. But then when he reads about the national poverty wage, he kind of learns that he has a poverty wage.
Mm-hmm.
But if he has a poverty wage, how the hell did he get this house and phone and TV? But then people could say because maybe at that time you could have poverty wages, but still be able to afford your own home, and such things. Whereas today you can't.
I have to cut in and say that I remember years ago, somebody telling, like a unemployment officer telling me that what the poverty line was, and that how X, Y, and Z meant that you were above the poverty line. And I remember telling her I said, if that's the poverty line, I've never been above the poverty line in my life. So I was pretty much in the same boat these guys are in, but I couldn't afford a TV. But anyway.
Okay. So glad to hear that you're above the poverty line.
Yeah, now I am, barely.
And now Raymond even has a scooter, but not just a motorbike, a Lambretta, because they were becoming popular, Italian. And look, they travel by train third class, but as Ernest says, soon they're doing away with third class. There'll only be first and second class. We're getting closer and closer to equality because, as socialism says, no one should be a third class citizen. Yes, but Ethel is never impressed by these pronouncements that Ernest makes. And television, they're even going to start television earlier at like 6 p.m. It's going to come on at 6 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
But as Ethel, says, well, doesn't make any difference. You won't be able to watch it. We'll be too busy having it tea time.
Mm-hmm.
I love the way she's not impressed at all with any modern developments apart from the laundrette. And whenever Ernest is quite excited by stuff, she has no excitement at all. She doesn't really seem to care, So Ernest, again, it just is going on and on with all these developments. There's going to be stereo. What's a stereo? What's this? Panoramic sound. What's that? 3D, whatever. And what does Ethel say? I don't think I want to bother with it. No, just don't want to bother with anything. Ernest, quite rightly, is appalled that the bishop of some particular church, is he the bishop of Canterbury? I don't know. He's like, the bishop has criticized women who work and have children. They are the enemies of family life.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, woman's place in the home with the kids, not like Margaret Thatcher trying to become a politician.
Right.
Isn't it interesting? Margaret Thatcher, Conservative Party, and she was the absolute rebel.
Mm-hmm.
Absolute opposite of that. How liberal could you be, saying, no, I'm a mother and a wife, but I'm going to, get into politics and become a politician. How ironic. So anyway, but again, Ethel not impressed because, after all, the Archbishop is a gentleman. He's a gentleman and he's Christian. So there you go. That's all right. And I love Ernest is getting into the beatnik lingo. Hey, tells his wife, listen, we've got to be hip, groovy, babe, real cool, hang loose with the cats. Yeah, man. And when she protests, he says, you're a square baby. Oh, Ernest, when will you grow up? She's so matter of fact, deadpan, right? And he's quite a lively character. Yeah, they're a good match. They balance each other out. And that's what their son shows all the way through this. They balance each other out.
Um, because of the because of the limited amount of time, I think Adam, you can probably be the best at summarizing this last section, right?
Yes, well, there's two sections,
Oh,
but
two
the one is
sections.
so brief, I'm just going to do that. So, essentially, at this point, we find out Raymond's going to be a teacher at art school, and the sort of thread we've been discussing continues, where Ernest gets new technology, new little I don't know, luxuries at home, and Ethel is very hesitant about it. For example, he gets a brand new green car for them to drive around in. But this sort of cultural clash also comes to a head with Raymond bringing his girlfriend home. Every time he comes home, it's a routine joke where his mother, instead of saying hello, just says, here's a comb to comb his long hair, which he's been growing. And of course, more and more discussions happen between the family. Essentially, what we're getting here is a sense where Raymond is growing up. He's becoming an adult in the 1960s. He's becoming more independent. He's becoming more left-leaning, even surpassing his dad's socialist leanings as well. There's a sequence coming here where he actually goes to buy a house. I believe it's in a page or two, Mike. And his mother just essentially says, "This is a dump." I think might be the next page. Yeah, this one. And he goes, "Dump, Mom, the government has delegated this, an area of outstanding natural beauty. It's official." To which she replies, "I still say it's a dump." And throughout all of this, we get more humorous, charming sequences, such as where Raymond is so proud, or pardon me, Ernest is so proud of his retirement certification that he wants to nail it to the wall right next to all of his son's certification from art school, to which Ethel goes, "I'm not sure I want it on the front room wall." And he goes, "Well, that's where it's going, Ethel." Now, more and more discussions happen between the pair as we see a sort of, I guess you could say, physical decline of Ethel, whereas Ernest is in awe over all of these technological and social changes, including, I believe it's in a page or two, where he's looking wide-eyed at the footage of the moon landing. Ethel is waylaid in bed, appearing disinterested and possibly ill. She is asking questions. What are they doing on the moon? Perhaps they'll have a picnic. Was that going to be windy up there? And obviously not comprehending exactly the profundity of what's occurring. And this bleeds into the final decade. And we should mention this spans the entire life of this couple, Ernest and Ethel, from when they met to the year of their death, both having passed in 1971. And this is where it definitely goes into more of a somber note, where we do see Ethel is on the decline. Ernest is now reading her newspaper articles, and both Raymond and his spouse are visiting her as she's waylaid in bed. And inevitably, her decline leads her to hospitalization. She must be within an institution, and we can see very likely what she's suffering from is Alzheimer's, as she has no recollection of people around her. She has no recollection that Ernest is her husband. And it's a very sad, very poignant scene in which on the next page, Ernest walks away covering his face, trying not to show his tears as his wife forgets who he is. Now, there's also a really hard scene to read, I will admit, where we have Ernest getting the news that his wife has died, and he's phoning up his son to let him know that she has passed. And then we go to a sequence where they're identifying the body. And for anyone who's had a parent or a loved one or friend pass and they've had to go through this situation, I think the starkness, the somberness, and the anger of the sequence is one of the most authentic representations I've ever seen of it. It's not an easy sequence to read in this book, but this is what happens when we near the end of a life. And we see Ernest now without his wife, living by himself, going through the same motions as he normally would, having conversations out loud to himself, as if Ethel was by him. But of course, she's not. His only company is the cat, who on his last day alive is still hunkering around him as he has some sort of fall or accident, succumbing to injury, and ultimately passes. And the last couple pages, I think, really show the silence I talked about, which is such a strong suit for Briggs that you don't need any dialogue, exposition. You perfectly understand what's happening. And as we go to page 101, we have Raymond and his spouse going through the house, setting everything up to be packed away. And on the final page, or I should say the semi-final page of the full illustrations, we have again a return to that motif, the front view of the house, where he goes in reflection staring at it saying, they never moved, 41 years in the same house.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the comic ends with a beautiful image of a single tree in memory of Ethel Briggs and Ernest Briggs. And that is the story of Ernest and Ethel, a working class couple who raised an exceptional artist and really one of the most profound, I guess you could say, biographies, true life stories I've ever read in the comic medium. I'm really grateful to Mike and Paul to give an opportunity to talk about this because this is one I've wanted to discuss for a while. It's an incredible, earnest, mind the pun, look at what it meant to grow up during a very tumultuous time in history through what could be considered average common people. And I think there is a certain profundity within that, seeing how these massive events go through the everyday person, how it impacts the everyday individual. And I see this as a very honest, very telling portrait of an artist's family. And I think as a book, as a narrative, it's beautiful. And I'm glad that we could cover it today.
Yeah, I think has to be one of the most comprehensive depictions of, a couple's life I've ever seen. To go from the very, very first time they met to both of their deaths is pretty, I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. So it's definitely unique. And I think I mentioned this last week that I've actually got another graphic novel by the same author that's been sitting on my shelf for years and I've just never read it because someone gave it to me. And so I'm going to have to pull that out now. And I do want to say, as far as the art goes, I think the thing that really hits me is his use of color. I think it's incredible use of color. Other than that, yeah, I mean, I found it, I love it. What do you think, Paul?
I think lots of things. So let me say them pretty quickly. Like I said before, it's kind of almost unheard of to have a graphic novel, and there's nothing fictional. At least we don't think so. I guess a lot of it is based on what his father or mother may have told him about the past. But I think it's really important. I think all kids should read this in school. It will certainly get their critical thinking going, and it will give them a good history lesson, but from something they can relate to because they're human beings. Mm-hmm. It's not just the big events and the big battles and on this date and on that date. You get the history through this couple and their lives and the changes in society, and it's all encapsulated. So, I mean, in addition to the art, which is, sometimes you could say, yeah, is that art really good? But it's very effective. And in some places it has touches of beauty. In other places you're thinking, that's a little bit iffy. But it's very effective. I didn't doubt it. I didn't question anything looking at the art. And for me, like I said, I can relate to some of it because even though I was born much later than Raymond Briggs, still, my mother had to leave school when she was 11 because of the war. My father left when he was like 15. And I think he went to England from Malta when he was like 16. My mother was already in England. So they had no, big education between them, no qualifications, nothing. They just worked. And even when I was a child, my mother used to ask me how to spell things when she had to write letters. How do you spell this? How do you spell that? And I always used to wonder a little bit, why is she asking me how to spell things? I'm 9 years old. but I understand. Later, I understood. And look how deadpan she is, and how the father's usually like full of energy. My mother was much the same way. My father wanted to, like, in working class East London, we lived in a terraced house. My father wanted to buy the house next door and I don't know whether he wanted to make one big house or buy it and rent it out, or he had plans. My mother was like, no, I don't think so. And so that didn't get done. And then when we moved to kind of went up a class division and we moved to North London, I still carried my East London Cockney stuff with me. And so then it would come out every now and again, and my mother would get upset. And she would tell me, stop saying that. Just like in this, he says, blimey. Blimey
Sure.
is very common. I remember my mother telling me, stop saying that. And when my sister and I first played with the kids next door, the boy from next door said, after my sister said something, he told us how that we were very common. Common means, like really working class.
Sure.
And I told my mother, I said, the boy next door said we're really common. He didn't, did he? Oh, no. So there are quite a few similarities, even with like the Beatles. I grew up on Beatles records. My mother loved them until they actually became artistic. Not autistic,
Sure.
of course, artistic. And I said, no, that's when they became really good. She said, no, I liked them until they became funny. By funny, she meant strange.
Sure.
So as soon as they actually started expressing art in music, in writing, in words, no, she didn't like that. And half my undergraduate degree is in film, study of film and media. And what did my mother say? Oh, once we got color TV, I could never watch anything in black and white again. And I'd say, what? What are you talking about? There's all these great films in black and white. They're shot with black. Oh, no, I couldn't watch black and white again. So I see parallels. When I see Raymond Brigg's depiction of his parents, I see parallels like with my parents and kind of things they went through. My father would come home, look, we got the color TV. It's all spanking new and shiny. And he liked to do these things. My mother was, even though she said I could never go back to black and white. There was one thing that shocked me, though. We were watching Star Trek, and by this time we had color TV. And she said, oh, I like that. I like that show. And I thought, what? My mother liked Star Trek?
Right.
I don't really know why she did, but she did. She liked it, with Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock and everything.
Did you like Doctor Who?
No. And what do you think she said to me about my interest in comic books?
She hated them?
She was despaired. She said, oh, no, I thought you would grow out of it.
Of course.
And here I am all these years later with you two.
That's right.
Talking about comic book art. So sorry to my mother. Sorry. No, I didn't grow out of it. I grew into it. Because it's an art form. It's the art form that I love. And that's why we're looking at this. Right?
That's right.
It's the art form that we love, the combination of words and images or, whatever. But she couldn't comprehend that. Just like she couldn't comprehend how the Beatles know they're artists. No, black and white was shot with artistic black and white in mind. But they're different generation.
Of course, yeah.
And so anyway.
Speaking of art and speaking of art forms, I wish your mother could have read our next choice, which is Catwoman Defiant by Peter Milligan, folks. We're going to continue the serious discussion in our next episode. Just to be fair, this wraps up our Peter Milligan Batman run, so don't worry, there's going to be no more, for a while anyway, any more Batman for a while. Then we'll get back to the serious stuff after this. But I want to thank Adam for bringing a real graphic novel to the table, and this is my counterpoint to that, but it'll be fun, as usual. I want to thank Nice Man for enlightening us on British culture, as usual, right?
Yeah, I guess.
Until the next time, see you later.